Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Bleeding Edge podcast. I'm your host, Ralph Benker, and my co-host in the studio with me today, Emil Ogier. Emil, welcome to the Edge.
Thanks, Ralph. Good to be back.
Yeah, we've had a little hiatus. Travel plans and work and a few things have meant that we have had to be elsewhere, but we are back this week. And of course, we have 2 weeks worth of news to catch up on, which is obviously going to take us a bit of time. But everything is on the bleeding-edge-ai.vercel.app, and you can catch up on all of the stories that we have been gathering in the news out and about in the world of AI. And of course, there are some very exciting updates. I'll probably start with the first one, that Mythos is back in the form of Fable 5, but some say with its balls cut off. A slightly somewhat neutered Fable 5 has made a reappearance. Emil, I'm sure you will share some of the deficiencies that people are talking about on X and some of the other platforms, but it's back and actually has been doing some really good work for me. It's going to be kicking around, available to us on various plans until the 7th of July. Unfortunately, no free usage, but you are able to use up to 50% of your available spend, of your available tokens. You can now actually use with Fable 5, which is good news. And so on to a couple of the other stories. So it seems that it's all about chips and memory and hardware in the last week. So what we've seen is that the memory squeeze is becoming AI's binding constraint. So really interesting article in the FT that Apple, get this, you'll love this story, is actually lobbying the US government to buy memory chips from blacklisted Chinese suppliers to cover the shortfall. I think that's
Wow.
incredible. So, there you go. What to do with your trade deficit, go forth and buy chips from blacklisted Chinese suppliers. And so we've also seen that Micron signed a investment deal with Anthropic for chips, and OpenAI detailed its first custom chip. So we are moving from software into, again, the hardware era. It's funny how these things seem to go around in cycles, but what have we had? We've kind of had the software, then we had the data centers, and now we've got the chips. Literally everything is, converging, and everything is becoming a pinch point. So capacity is literally straining the entire supply chain. But all of the labs, really, in terms of the news, what it looks like is they are racing to lock up HBM and DRAM. So those are the kind of key hardware components. We can talk a little bit more about the roles of those, but that has become the significant barrier. So there are 56 US firms that have been banned by China. So this is kind of going both ways, mostly defense contractors, rare earth miners, and that is relating retaliation for the Pentagon military blacklist. And the reason all of this is getting very exciting is because the constraint is shifting from models to the physical substrate. Of course, no doubt, back in the news will be we've run out of water and we've run out of energy and electricity. But at the moment, it's very much on the hardware side. So obviously, the US and China fighting very much a war of attrition on who can ban the most firms the fastest. Moving on to another interesting news item in the last week from OpenAI, they launched Daybreak. So what they've now got is their kind of Mythos equivalent, GPT 5.5 Cyber, and they have launched an initiative called Patch the Planet. So no doubt this is in response to obviously Fable 5 being pulled because it essentially allows anybody with a keyboard the ability to do sophisticated, attacks, let's just say, and you can expose vulnerabilities. And OpenAI have basically chosen to, lead from the front and say this isn't about exposing vulnerabilities and hacks. This is actually about patching vulnerabilities first. Obviously, what is going on now is we're kind of seeing that the most powerful models are being released to a small number of actors initially. And, the idea there is that they experiment with those models, identify the vulnerabilities, patch them, hopefully share them with all the good actors in the world before the bad actors actually get their hands on this capability. And so this is kind of fascinating. I think it's kind of changing the idea of defense, right? So we're really seeing that our most vulnerable platforms are in fact software platforms. And so actually, war is maybe something of history if you think of it in this way. Obviously, that's not what's going on in the Ukraine and elsewhere, but certainly for the rest of us, this is a much bigger reality than somebody raining down bombs. And so I think fixing the flaws is definitely an interesting way of tackling it. But I am a little bit concerned that it's no longer, the democratization. Did I say that right? The democratization of, the AI capability, knowledge for all men. No, it's knowledge. An application of AI for the few, and maybe we'll get what's left over. So the Model Wave also rolls on in the news. We are hearing about GPT 5.6 Sol, which I'm not quite sure if it has been fully released, but I know it's in preview. And this 5.6 is basically pushing reasoning even further. So other releases that we've seen, DeepSeek V4 plus DSpark, Fable 5, which appeared sometime on a late evening in the last week on my available list, and I started to use it immediately. And so it's back from the dead, and hopefully, you can tell us how it performs, because I know you shared a couple of very interesting visualizations on that. So just jumping into a little bit about DeepSeek. Obviously, DeepSeek is a Chinese LLM. They ship DSpark, and it is a speculative decoding method, and it basically runs DeepSeek 57 to 85% faster than its prior version. And so that is very exciting. DeepSeek was pretty fast even before all of that. But, kind of seeing full stack model refreshes from 3 labs in 1 week, like it's pretty impressive. We know things were moving fast, but this kind of release cadence, things are not cooling down. We are just seeing tremendous strides, even 2 years into what was already a accelerated journey amongst many different labs. And so I think we've got our work cut out for us, Emil. One other news item here that caught my eye this week is an interesting story about a guy called John Jumper who has jumped. He's leaving Google DeepMind for Anthropic. So we've seen Andre Karpathy, who was obviously OpenAI. He was also in Tesla. He founded his own AI education company. Then at some point, went back into OpenAI, and now he's joined Anthropic. And now we've got John Jumper, who is a Nobel laureate for basically creating the AlphaFold routine, which, if memory serves me correctly, is able to synthesize proteins. So this guy is a real smarty pant, and he knows his stuff. And so Anthropic are building the A team. Not only are they the only lab that is profitable, and not only are they the most valuable lab, but still only 8% of the market share. They are now also, building the best team. And it seems to me that people are joining them for the mission, which is kind of interesting because that's the only way that you can really win the talent war. But essentially, DeepMind have just lost their most decorated researcher to a direct rival. So that is going to hurt, and we'll have to see, what he's going to cook up at Anthropic. And then a couple of other items just back on the hardware side. The labs are definitely buying their way into silicone. And obviously, we've kind of already spoken about the Micron Anthropic deal, OpenAI's first chip. But Dell has also released a GB10 desktop. And so I have not quite checked out the specs on that one, but it is reported as being something that you can essentially run your local model on. And as we know, local is lacquer. Having a local model is something that we should all aspire to if we don't have to spend too much money. So Dell shipping a workstation built on NVIDIA's GB10 is a big deal because it kind of signals, accessible hardware that doesn't cost you tens of thousands, but something that you can actually afford and build your own home lab. So those were the top stories of the last week. Anything interesting there for you, Emil?
Yeah, I Obviously, Fable Five is the big story of the week, so just want to add a little bit more color around that. As you've mentioned, Rolf, they redeployed globally after US export controls were lifted, whereby they essentially have added stronger classifiers to block cybersecurity misuse while promising refinements to minimize the false positives. Initial user engagement on X is suggesting that sensitivities are set quite high at the moment. Hopefully they'll iron that out, but it's a bit of a mixed bag, Rolf. Like what I'm experiencing, one end users are complaining, saying it's been heavily nerfed, and others that have more sophisticated harnesses set up and workflows are sailing through and reporting good things. So I guess it's just really how you using the model. Those controls are there. Maybe there's ways around it, or maybe it's just the specific use cases each person is using in each project is giving a different set of results. Yeah, I mean, the overall sentiment is people are frustrated, they've lost time on it, but equally, everybody's just happy that it's there and they can use it again. Yeah, it'll be interesting. The routine coding and debugging tasks will temporarily fall back to Opus 4.8 under the new safeguards. The announcement includes plans for an industry framework also with Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and others on jailbreak assessments, plus deeper US government collaboration on model testing and safeguards. Audience reaction to Anthropic's announcements is generally negative and frustrated, as I mentioned. Users widely view the new classifiers, temporary fallbacks to coding and debugging to Opus 4.8, short availability window, and usage restrictions as significantly diminishing the model's value for paying subscribers. A small minority acknowledge legitimate safety and misuse risks, especially around cybersecurity, but they criticizing the execution as overly restrictive for legitimate use cases, and fairly so. Many express intent to reduce reliance on Anthropic or switch providers, citing that some routine tasks like coding and debugging, where Anthropic's actual words, is broadly seen as misleading, given that coding is a core high value use case for frontier models. There is a broader theme of eroded trust, and I think this is really the main story here with calls for migration to OpenAI models or open source alternatives. One example of common themes that I saw on replies captured it quite well in terms of frequency of comments I saw was, so we basically have Fable on our sub for less time than we originally planned, for less usage allowed than the sub originally allowed, and it also can't be used for coding tasks during the time we can use it, question mark. But either way, it's great to see the model out there so we can use it. Maybe we get lucky and they do another extension, but yeah, enjoy it while you have it.
Yeah, and then of course they actually came out with Sonnet 5 as well, so kind of double stacked the model release. I have been using Fable 5 quite successfully, and as a top tip, I've been obviously sharing this in our various groups. But one of the best ways of using Fable 5 is actually building a skill that is able to architect prompts for Fable 5 to use. And the reason why that is so effective is because you can really build in the limitations of Fable 5. So basically, the prompt architect that I put together in a skill checks what how Fable 5 likes to be prompted, and also how not to activate those gotchas, so those guardrails where it then either stops processing, or it degrades to a lower order model. And so that has actually worked very successfully for me. So I have been seeing it do very long coding runs. And when it's actually been a task that didn't require Fable 5. So I highly recommend going in and just asking Claude to build a skill for how to prompt, each of these models, and you can just build one skill and train it on the best prompting techniques for each model. And of course, you can go to the official GitHub, which Anthropic has, and on there it sets out exactly how each model wants to be prompted. Drop that into a skill, and every time you start using Fable 5, you start with prompt architect, you write the intent and get it to write the prompt, and you have a much better experience with Fable 5. And you also really get it to optimize what the model does. So Fable 5 is particularly good at long runs, and also what we saw when it initially came out, it does stuff that it's not been asked to do but knows is fundamental to your mission. So the other top tip is start with the outcome. Start with what you want the user experience to be of whatever the piece of software or solution is that you're building, and get the prompt architect to actually build a prompt to deliver that outcome. And with that, you get a much broader instruction for Fable 5. That means it will go through a design process, a build process, and even a testing process. Obviously, debugging is one of those gray areas where you might still hit some issues, but I've had it, test and fix the applications that it's actually built, and it's been very successful in that way. So I think it's down to, partly how you actually, what you're asking the model, how you're asking the model, and there is no way we have the time to learn how to prompt each of these models. So just go forth and prompt your intent. Forget about, context engineering and prompt engineering. You're now in the world of intent engineering. Explain the outcome that you're looking for, and it will build the rest around that. So that's my top tip for how to use it.
Thanks,
But
Rob. That's really good advice. And just to complement the tips you mentioned, I saw an interesting post from Leo. He's also been getting a ton done with Fable yesterday, and he's not hitting his rate limits. And he wanted to share some tips in, how he's achieving that success rate. He's only using Fable on high effort for now. X high is citing is really token hungry, and Max in the lower options in his humble opinion. He's also taught Claude Code how to use Codex as a fallback for lots of implementation tasks. ChatGPT is incredibly steerable, and Fable can learn how to steer it. His third point is he's wrote up a big section in his Claude MD file for how to prioritize different models for different work when orchestrating workflows and subagents. And his fourth point is things that are necessarily token hungry, like computer use and code base analysis, he'll do with other models and report the results back to Fable. He does admit that he hasn't read much of his own MD file, just vibe coded it out, and what he was looking for with Fable, and had it confirm it can use Codex for things he cares about. And, as long as it does that, your uncle, and still finds Codex to be way better at computer use, verification for UI and UX work, and generally more efficient than at execution on well-spec'd work. And mini-maxing this has generally been really fun for him, and loving the outputs that he's been getting. He's saying he was throwing away 50% of his end-to-end agent-driven PRs before building this workflow, and he hasn't had to close a single one since yesterday. So pretty positive.
yeah, it sounds like he has figured out a very effective pattern. And I love the idea of guiding the model on, well, just guiding the LLM on which model to select.
Yeah.
So from an engineering standpoint, I do change models, but not as often as I would like, mainly just because it takes time to do that extra step, and actually steering the model is a really smart way of doing it. So I'm definitely going to borrow that tip, and I will check that out. But your point there, Emil, about not becoming dependent on any one model, I think that has been the big shift for the market over the last couple of weeks. People know that just because the model is there doesn't mean it's actually going to be made available to them. We are not in a free market economy anymore when it comes to these very capable AI models. It is now very much a political endeavor. And obviously, at the end of the day, the models we do have access to are so capable, but I think we definitely need to create options. And that is something that I'm working on also in my own work, but it's really difficult. So it takes a lot of time to be able to set up access to all these different models. Even though it's a well-trodden path, it's not necessarily something that we always have a lot of time for. As ever, the human in the loop is our biggest point of friction. So, and of course, we are the humans, as far as I know. But that's really interesting news. And maybe actually it might be a good opportunity just to share a little build that I actually did with Fable 5. I don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, for our pet project, which we have been reporting on the Bleeding Edge podcast over the last few months. But of course, one of the ways that I am proving what AI is capable of is by building out a AI first record label, and that is now going through various iterations. Why have I picked this project? Well, I think it demonstrates obviously the music generation capability of AI. It also demonstrates how to actually put workflows together, complex workflows, in order to orchestrate content. And then it also actually proves how AI can interact with various systems like YouTube and SoundCloud and Spotify, all of these applications that typically host our music. And it also speaks to the whole licensing debacle about AI generated content, because as we know, Warner Music, Sony Music, Universal Music, they have all been in extended legal battles with the likes of Udio and Suno, and legal precedent is constantly shifting. In addition to that, it also demonstrates the capability of e-commerce, because this particular music label has access to merchandise channel for each of the different brands. And it also speaks to the generative capability, because as part of this music generation, I have also put in the pipeline that it generates still images and videos. So I felt like this was the most complete way that we could really test a whole slew of technologies in an extended project. And of course, the aim is to see, can you actually get an AI native end-to-end business up and running, have it run reasonably autonomously with a human in the loop where it matters. And so without further ado, would you like to see what it looks like?
Please hit me up. Can't wait.
Great. So here we go. Hopefully you can see this okay. I will just zoom in. So let me just give some context here. This is a website. It's actually a web application that was developed by Fable Five. It ran for about 20 minutes and produced this. And one of the things it did was it created a radio station. So this particular music label, San Carlos Records, now has its own radio station. And you can see we've got the Alpacas in Ibiza theme song, which is an album I wrote for a local alpaca farm. Obviously the theme song is really introducing the soap opera that we have also written but not yet filmed. But there it is. These alpacas are going to be truly famous. And the radio station is really effective. I really love it. Fable 5 did a great job integrating all of that with SoundCloud. You can actually see here are each of the personas. There's a really cool little action that it's got as you move through each of the albums. It looks very professional. All of this built with Fable 5. I did have an earlier mock-up that was actually built with Sonnet 4.8. And so it wasn't that Fable 5 started with a blank canvas. There was an awful lot already set out as a mock-up that I did about 2 months ago. And when I found 20 minutes in the last week, I just said, right, Fable 5, go and have a look at this and optimize it. You can see we've got a couple of issues here, just with a few things that are not lined up correctly, but that'll be a quick fix. And it's then gone forth and really set out the business model for this autonomous music label. And you can go in and license a particular record. You can actually, basically, you can license it to perform a song. You can license it to produce your own song from a sound. You can actually license a particular song. You can license a character, or you can commission your own. So those are the models over there, and it's come up with some prices. I am essentially giving the AI free rein to figure out what an AI native music label should contain, how it should monetize, and through my prompting, encouragement, and nudging, it's basically set out this commercial model. And then obviously you can see over here that you have the option to basically build your own AI first label and get everything in the box. And everything in the box is a tool that, so there are 23 agents sitting behind this thing, everything from the CEO to the lyric writer to the actual marketing agent. And it means that, it starts with basically building a persona. So, who's the artist behind the album? What is the reason for the album? What's the inspiration? And then basically it kicks off a catalog pipeline, which is then able to write the songs and build the albums, and all the way through to actually creating the artwork. And then where the human in the loop comes, obviously listening to what it produces, curating the list, throwing out anything that is not at the right level of quality. And then I have to manually publish to SoundCloud. So one of the things I'm finding, and this is a control point by the music industry, is that essentially a manual upload is required. There are certain things that you can actually get the AI to do through computer use, but actually in terms of the terms of service, you have to manually upload these things into the likes of SoundCloud and Spotify. So that's all fine. It means that there is real human curation at play. And a bit of a shout out to Jack Matthews, who said, when England will win the World Cup, you have to release a song. And so one of the tests that I have done is I have actually had the pipeline generate the album for England, and it goes through and there's a song for each match. And obviously it basically sings about the context and the experience of that match. And it has matched the genre to the team that they were playing. So obviously, each song has a slightly different flavor. I haven't actually generated the music just yet, but the album is written, the lyrics are written, the sound profiles have been picked. And this thing goes through and masters all of the songs when they are produced. And then eventually what it will also do is it will apply for any copyright that it can. So the lyrics can be copyrighted. And essentially what you then have is a real asset in terms of the music that you've generated. And you can then turn that into merch. You can also have the album written to vinyl. I think the cost of that is around 30 euros, 28 pounds, $39 if you like. And so it's very accessible to actually have your music put on vinyl. And essentially, you can buy this entire platform, which is the label in a box. And the AI has set a very accessible price of 18K for that. There is a lot of tech behind it. And so if you have 18K to spare and you want to generate your own music label and have it generate the music through a pipeline and basically run through the full distribution and marketing process, in addition to driving merch sales, integrated with a Spotify e-commerce catalog that is coming soon, as you can see over here. And it will then also have the full integration into the various social media platforms for marketing. So I think, what we're heading to here is going to be a digitally, a distributed automation, automated organization, what they call a DAO. This thing should run reasonably hands-off, other than those critical points where human creativity has to really come in to review the lyrics and approve them, and then obviously do the final selection of what music actually goes forth. And you can kick this whole thing off by essentially sending a briefing prompt through on Telegram. And Telegram just connects to the AI agent. The AI agent will ask you a few questions, and then it will basically just go forth and produce whatever you need. So that is essentially where we have got to. And if you are really in the mood, you can actually see here there is a bit of a configurator. So a few months ago, I tried to actually create marryme.com. You probably may have heard that from an old episode, and that was a song configurator built on anti-gravity. I got really far with it, then started to hit some issues. It didn't quite get live, but this is going to be the latest incarnation of that. and essentially you will be able to come in and just commission a song, or an album, or indeed, a string of albums. And eventually this will move from a request form to basically just generate. And so all of that is coming. But I think just a really good showcase, of where we have got to. This is the website, just once again, that Fable Five has built. And all of this is actually distributing music that this particular label, San Carlos Records, has already generated. It is able to generate probably around 2 albums a day. The limitation is purely the amount of time that it takes me to review. At the moment, I have no time at all, so I'm producing maybe 2 albums a week, because that 10 minutes it takes for me to review and upload them to SoundCloud truly is a point of friction. But let's see, I don't think we'll be able to overcome that entirely, and nor should we, because that is really where the human in the loop comes in. So, a multi persona AI label broadcasting from the Balearic Coast, 9 personas, one method, recordings you actually own, sounds, songs, albums, characters, and entire labels on request. So, again, all of this built by AI, all of this run by AI. The AI has developed the strategy, and really I'm just chaperoning it through the process. And so this is, I think, an excellent showcase of what the true capability of AI is today. I'm sure we will be able to go even further with it. But any thoughts on that,
Oh,
Emil?
it's looking great. You're packing a lot in there, Rolf. And as you mentioned, you kind of take the words right out of my mouth. It's a wonderful showcase of just showing what you can do, taking these frameworks to more sophisticated levels, getting your agents in, getting all the workflows in, getting the pipelines in. It's the perfect project, and I'm sure it's going to be welcomed by a lot of people. Nice job. Thanks for showing it.
And of course, there's no expectation that any of this is actually going to work. All we're doing is we're really just testing and throwing everything that I can do at it and seeing where it goes. It's a kind of a fun project for a Saturday. And I think, people should go and have a play with it, see what's possible. Certainly listen to the music, check out the radio station. It's a pretty cool little feature. And actually that probably will be the next area that when I get some time, we will build out, because we'll go back into video generation. And so the radio station will actually also be looking at, well, what does an AI native radio station look like, with AI native programming, AI native content, but really also trying to make sure that there are guardrails so that it's not producing slop. How do we get high quality stuff that actually is useful to us and that people value? So no doubt I'll get some feedback via our various channels, but that's where we've got to this week. Looking at the monetization of this project, I think I am still at $18, which is revenue earned over the last year. And that is now off some 20,000 plays on SoundCloud. I guess I have one hit so far with one song that has garnered some 4,500 listens, many thumbs ups and likes on SoundCloud. But, obviously not enough to make a living, although the cost of having put all of this together is still reasonably low. It's kind of, other than my time, it's like in the hundreds of euros. So not an expensive endeavor to get to this point, just a lot of time investment. And well, I say that, obviously you need to have your various subscriptions, which is probably the biggest cost. So
Stick with it; it'll continue to grow. And I love your very cool looking llama. I'd definitely party with him. He looks like he knows what he's doing.
well, it's actually, because he's not a llama at all, he's an alpaca. So
Alpaca.
yep, yeah, the local farm is called Alpakistan, and you're right, they are all very cool, at least in terms of how they appear on my content. When you kind of hang out with them, they're a little bit more down to earth, but nonetheless, it's an exciting project to see, how we can, well, just kind of anthropomorphize
There you
these
go.
animals. Emil, why don't we move on to something
Yeah,
a little bit more serious?
no problem. And thanks for showcasing. Amazing work, Rolf. I wanted to circle back on GLM 5.2. I've been mentioning it in several last podcasts because it is kind of gaining traction, and there does seem to be an unlikely rise with it. The Chinese open weight model has just achieved something that was supposedly impossible. It's beating Fable 5 at front-end design, marking a big shift in how we perceive global AI capability. To understand this, the AI Daily Brief compares us to DeepSeek's R1 moment back in 2025. That was when a relatively unknown Chinese lab dropped a free reasoning model inside an app, and suddenly the market had a complete meltdown. NVIDIA, if you recall, lost a staggering 589 billion in market cap in a single day because investors thought the competitive moat had evaporated overnight. Usually, these Chinese open weight models follow a predictable life cycle. They crush the benchmarks, as we know, generate insane hype for a week or two, and then quietly disappear when real world usage proves them too fragile. The GLM 5.2 for now seems to be defying this trend. Predominant tech leaders are genuinely stunned by its coding capabilities, meaning it's actually surviving contact with real world developers. When we look at the specific data from Designer Reader for GLM 5.2, it's ranking first in website design, which is a pretty reliable measure, specifically because it avoids notorious AI design flaws like those infamous early purple gradients, if you recall, and it's incredibly proficient at naturally calling complex dependencies like Chart.js and Tailwind CSS. However, this capability does come with a serious cost constraint. The detail outputs from GLM 5.2 result in 25% more characters and lines of code, doubling the generation time. And running it locally at peak performance requires hardware that could cost you upwards north of $400,000. So, it's not cheap. This is a huge win, however, for applied AI layer. It means companies don't have to rent the most expensive state-of-the-art model for every single task. They can now build diverse, cost-optimized architectures leveraging powerful open-weight models or specific workflows while reserving the expensive frontier models for when they truly needed. The era of simple two-horse race in AI seems to be running its course. It's a good opportunity, at least, to start experimenting with these alternative architectures in a sandbox environment and see what works best for you. But I think, Rolf, there's just a common theme, like everything we've discussed with both GLM and Fable, the same theme keeps playing through. People are starting to look at routing more serious. It's just going to become a developing trend, and it's just going to mature. And all the clover that's happened with Fable 5 has kind of forced the hand for this path to be taken, and it's now been carved out. I think that's going to be the new reality of AI.
Yes, and what's fascinating about it is that, the US government can try to limit accessibility to the most highest performing models out there. Maybe China will do the same thing. Maybe indeed they are doing the same thing. But of course, these open source models will continue to be available. And actually, it might start pushing people towards them. So that's kind of exciting. One thing that I will call out is that actually, there is a really interesting stat. I'll probably get some of the specifics of it wrong, but if you really look at what you are using, so when you are using something like a Claude code or a codex, the component that is the LLM is really small, less than 2%. So what's the other 98%? Well, that is known as the harness. And the harness is essentially a framework that has, it's like a tool belt, really. And the reason why Claude Code has been so successful is it had a very extensive tool belt. It could connect to many things. It could run many things. It had many skills, many plugins. And obviously, this concept of MCPs, a Model Context Protocol, which meant it could actually access many systems that previously were not accessible. And so that incredible capability is really what has set Claude Code apart. The LLM is a small component of that. And when we talk about GLM 5.2, we're really talking about, the LLM component, not the harness around it. But you can also actually connect GLM 5.2 into Claude Code, which means that it can be the brain. You can utilize the harness, almost to the same level as Claude Code. I know that people talk about some limitations, and so that will become the new battleground, which kind of brings me to the Cursor story, because Cursor essentially, is a harness. They're also building out their own LLM brain, and they have been purchased now by XAI for the princely sum of 60 billion. No doubt a lot of that will be in various shares that people now have in the SpaceX company, but probably a few new billionaires minted out of that deal. And it's kind of interesting as well, because I think it was a good move from Elon to actually buy Cursor. It means that XAI is partly back in the game. But some of the critics have said, actually, if you look at this, Cursor was already declining. It went from something like 50% market share to about 25% market share. And it's actually, declining in a market that is rapidly expanding, which just goes to show just how much competition has actually come to the fore. So, was Elon right to buy it? Was he right to spend 60 billion on it? Did he buy into something that is actually declining? Was it a desperate move? I think all of those things are probably true. Are they criticisms? No, I think they're just the reality of the game. What else was he going to do? I think XAI is sitting at something like 2% in terms of its overall user base. And so you've got Gemini and OpenAI with ChatGPT absolutely leading in terms of the lion's share of users. But I think just from an internal point of view, that probably made sense for him to have his own capability. And so I'm not going to think too critically about that deal, but 60 billion did seem to be an awful lot of money. Although, you know what? It just kind of was created out of thin air when SpaceX actually did their IPO. So,
Exactly. It's all relative in ratios.
it didn't cost him anything at the end of the day. He basically got it for free. For the rest of us, it's a big number. For Elon, it's just an uplift on another good day's worth of SpaceX shares trading
Rolf,
on
for
stock
what
exchange.
it's worth, just my personal take on that is I think it's a perfect match made in heaven, or perfect marriage, so to speak, because they both had what the other needed. XAI had the compute, and Kurt RL, they're sitting on really valuable development data to apply the RL to their new independent Kimi trained model, which is, if not, it's already come, it's coming soon. And the proof will really be in the pudding when we see that. What we've seen on the last training model, it was already impressive. The benchmarks, for what it's worth, were saying that, it's on par, closely matching Opus 4.8, which is a huge step change in improvement. I know that the benchmarks aren't fully reliable, but regardless, the step change was there. So they're moving in the right direction. And on a closing note, too, Grok really hasn't made a huge imprint in the AI world. The penetration's been low, subpar. I think it's somewhere between 1 to 3%. You called that out in a previous episode, Rolf. So on balance, I think the needle's moving in the right direction. As you say, the IPO was so huge for SpaceX. It's a drop in the ocean for them, hedging their bets. It gives them another card to play. I think it's quite an intelligent move personally by Elon, but time will tell where the product goes.
Yes, and what's interesting is XAI has now introduced a couple of new tools. So they've got their voice agent builder, a no-code builder for Grok voice agents. So obviously 11 Labs was really the first mover in terms of AI voice technology, and they have such a capable platform. We've also seen that Mistral actually about 2 months ago released the ability to essentially build your own 11 Labs, and now XAI basically coming in with their voice agent builder. So it's aimed at support, sales, and for scheduled calls. It's a point and configure voice agent that answers phones, qualifies leads, books appointments, and doesn't sing any songs. So I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be able to use it for the San Carlos record label experiment, but there you go. Mistral have also come out with a optical character recognition release, so it's version 4 that they're on, and this means it's basically able to extract documents at scale. It's essentially a full enterprise ready AI solution for optical character recognition, so multiple format documents, and extract structured data. And it's one of these things that they kind of see as a bit of an entry use case for any teams drowning in invoices, contracts, and forms that they actually need to get their hands on. Now, this is an interesting one. I'm doing quite a bit of just work on looking at extracting data from PDFs, and Claude Code does such a good job on it. I've not needed to, go to tools like Mistral for this OCR capability. Interestingly enough, Qwen also, this is Alibaba's LLM model, also has a very capable optical character recognition capability. So a little bit of kind of like also ran in terms of XAI and Mistral in that sense. Are they doing enough to really pull users over to them? They're kind of, catching up or just playing, in a space where solutions are already available. So not really sure what to make of that. And then the last new AI tool of the week is Liquid AI. A very interesting name, LFM 2.5, 230 mil. So a 230 million parameter model pre-trained on 19 trillion tokens. Really? 19 trillion? Now, Liquid says that it beats models 4 times its size on data extraction. It runs anywhere. What does that mean? Well, it could run on your phone. So they're talking about these edge devices. It could run on your calculator. And that's really interesting if that is true, because over the years, we've been talking about IoT. Does anybody talk about IoT, the Internet of Things? It just seems to have evaporated as a conversation. But when you suddenly start having your fridge and your freezer with the access to the same level of intelligence as any frontier model, does it stop being a fridge or a freezer or a washing machine? I don't know what the answer to that is, but I can imagine we are going to get all kinds of weird and wonderful use cases.
Well, you joke, Rolf, but that does seem to be happening. There's several companies on the valley that are starting to push edge computing to homes, taking advantage of the water suppliers and the energy suppliers, and effectively, I'm not quite sure how they're doing it, but they're putting in a rack somehow into the household and sharing that back to the grid. So I think that theme is going to continue to mature and play out.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the robots are coming, and at the end of the day, I would say if you have an EV, electric vehicle, you are driving a robot. It will soon start driving you. And if we start to look at the Internet of Things and how we pair these kind of edge device concepts, make every single electrical device in your home not just smart, but super intelligent level, who knows. But I still have a leak in my pool and the water is drained, and my smart pool cleaner can't help me with that. So life gets in the way of all of these things at some point.
Rolf, I just want to move on to a really cool story on the job front. It's not for everyone, but it's good for some of us. Apparently, Anthropic will pay you $85,000 to learn AI. Seems almost too good to be true, and it's called Claude Corpse, and it's just been launched. It's a 12-month paid fellowship for people at the very start of their careers, and it's full-time 12-month job inside of a non-profit. You'll be expected to build things, train staff, and leave behind something useful that actually works. There is an application process, a practical assessment, and interviews. You do need to be over 18 and have a US work rights and have less than 2 years of full-time work experience, but no degree is required though. So it's a pretty decent deal if you can get it, paying you to master the most in-demand skill on the planet right now and handing you real-world experience using it. It's legitimate, well-funded program aimed at giving early career people paid AI experience while helping non-profits. So despite our youthful looks, I don't think it's for us, Rolf, but for those that it is applicable, check it out. It's a good offer.
Well, I think I can definitely tick the box. I'm over 18. I'm ready to join. Sign me up. Although, again, like we're all in the same place. This is what's so exciting about where this space is at. Everybody is new to this capability, whether you are just coming into the job market, whether you are a seasoned executive. And obviously, maybe that is upsetting if you're in the latter part of your career. You feel like you shouldn't have to work this hard. And of course, we've been working incredibly hard, keeping up with all this news, learning new skills, learning new technologies at a rate that certainly I have never encountered before. And it has been expansive, for me personally, and for the people that I've been working with in this space. Just on a bit of an aside note, I'm really seeing the next site solutions. That's, I'm working with clients to really onboard this hardware that is now installed in stores, and basically it is a wonderful label that I've actually got one just in front of me over here. It's a little label that goes on a tag, and that label can be read by various technologies in the store that basically can track every single item and where they move to. And this is starting to create some incredible insight when you pair it with AI. So something like 4 billion data points per store per week, and basically putting that all together, was a really big data challenge. But in the age of AI, we're able to make incredible sense of the various customer journeys that are evolving in the store, and actually driving some fundamental insight into human behavior, but also into how to make the shopping experience better. And that for me, is just such a privilege and honor to work on. And so I'm really quite bullish on some of what we've seen, but it is incredibly hard work. And I think we can't take for granted just the sheer amount of effort that people are putting in. And also, if I just jump onto kind of my next story, which is probably a little bit of an anecdotal story, I've been reading a lot of articles and feedback on what it means to be a developer in the age of AI. And obviously, over the last year, we've had the rise of vibe coding. We have seen that tools like Cursor and Base 44 and even Claude Code, and Pi, these tools have come to the fore as being kind of fundamental to the engineering experience of being a developer. We've heard from Anthropic that they have seen, probably about 6 months ago, I think Boris Cherny, the founder of Claude Code, the inventor, if you like, was saying, he has not written a line of code in about a month. So that was an ex post from some months back. And all of this stuff is recent history. The world is literally evolving in front of our very eyes. But what has it evolved to? And what developers are saying is they have now become reviewers. All they spend all day doing is reviewing documentation that the AI has produced, checking it for obvious errors, and really the fun has gone out of the development process. And so while you've got the people with the experience that actually can review and make sense of what the AI has set out in the design document, it's not really celebrating their skills. And some of them don't like it. And some of them are experiencing a new type of burnout, review burnout, basically where you are a passive participant in the inventions of your AI coding platform. And this has kind of meant that, a number of developers are looking at this going, I'm not sure this is what I spent the last 10 years developing my skills for, just to become a glorified reviewer of AI output. And obviously they're not feeling challenged. Personally, I have a view on this. I think human creativity, is abstracting up a level. It's much like what I see with the music. You're not there to create a hook or a sound, or maybe even a lyric. You're there to define what you want people to feel, the concept that you want the world to consume. And so that becomes essentially your instrument that AI then interprets into a persona, a song, an album, a series of albums. And so I think it changes our perception of what the instrument is and where human creativity needs to play out. However, and this is my final point on this, I just can't get away from the fact that, engineers, developers that have spent years and years refining their skills are finding that those skills are not relevant and that they're really not enjoying the part that remains. And while they are really the only people that can evaluate what the AI is outputting, they are no longer the ideal people to actually be doing that work. And so I think we've got a bit of a conundrum over here where people like myself that are system designers, operating model designers, able to put high-level concepts together, are really enjoying the creative release of AI interpreting our ideas. Developers are just finding it that it's mind-numbing review work and they don't want any of it. And it's leading to a new kind of burnout.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm seeing it myself, Rolf. I think there's even a term for it. We were discussing it. Instead of bot sitting, it's called bot shitting. And it's effectively exactly what you're calling out. And in addition to that, that exacerbated feeling of not having their worth or just policing over something is also creating a reduction in agency with these people, which is not ideal. So it's effectively rising the attrition rate in jobs, and people are looking for alternative placements just because they're bored or they don't feel like they're offering the value, or as you called out rightly, it's something they've trained years for. So I think we do need to watch this one, and I'm not quite sure how it plays out. And all the original doom mongering from the start of the year with the job apocalypse, that also seems to be a game of two halves. Is, if anything, the human in the loop is coming back and trending a lot harder now. And there have actually been an increase in jobs, but it depends how you cut it up. If you divorce and you dissect and you take finance and development work specifically, those jobs are reducing. But holistically, if you look at the whole job market, that seems to be increasing. So it's penetrating in a certain direction. Maybe that displacement will start widening up. I'm not sure. But yeah, there's two parts of the story. It's not as black and white as you might see in the papers.
Definitely not. I think there's a lot, that is incredibly positive. I was also reviewing a nice news article this week about Ford that actually put in a number of AI solutions to review the quality of the production line. And they have started hiring grey-haired engineers back into the production line to work in the factories. So guess what? They're going to have to take the canteen back. It was used as a battery storage bank for the robots. Now it's going to be used to serve humans tea. Once again, I've completely made that up. But the point is that, we're bringing humans back into the loop here in quite a significant way. And so I think all of this still has quite a long way to play out. But, the world of work is shifting and changing in really kind of quite meaningful ways. And so we should all just take a moment to appreciate just how significant this moment is in history as we're all kind of trying to find a new way. But I have basically finished most of my stories, and I've kind of been furiously scrolling through research over here because, as you know, we've also been testing over the weeks whether AI can actually generate a joke, but I'm actually not seeing my joke generator.
That's fine. As you look through, Rolf, I've got just a couple of very small bite pieces of news I thought was interesting. Again, from Theo, he's saying he's quite well connected in the market. He's saying it's insane how many people mostly use Claude models because their company is on AWS and they're using Bedrock, so it's by default. I thought that was quite interesting. And another news item: the U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth just appointed Mark Andreessen to the Defense Policy Board. If you don't know him, he's part of A16Z podcast group, now officially advising Pentagon on national security. And on topic of Mark Andreessen, he's also declaring on X that Dr. ChatGPT is already a better doctor than 99% of doctors. However, comments on X remain cautiously skeptical on it, and I'm not sure I'd want to be putting that doctor on in important surgeries just yet. But yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so that's our route, from podcast to security advisors. It's nice to see Mark blazing a trail for us. But I did find a couple of the jokes, and big health warning on these. They are horrendous, but somewhat amusing. So let's have a look. So first joke up. Actually, just to start, it says there was a rare disease story intentionally kept out of the jokes, which I really want to know what that joke was about the rare disease story. But I've asked it obviously to keep it civil and not be mean to anybody. But it came out with Google paid $2.7 billion to bring Noam Shazir back. So this was a guy that left Google. I think I'm not sure where he went first, but I think it was OpenAI. And 2 years later, he went back to OpenAI. So somewhere in Google's finance department, that's filed under temporary staffing. Yeah, really interesting that they paid so much money to get this guy back, and then he's headed off again. I wonder what that's cost him. But I mean, incredible that these people are being hired and being turned into billionaires themselves multiple times by multiple companies. It just shows you how hot the market is for the top talent. Right, next joke. SpaceX just pulled off the biggest startup acquisition in history. They bought Cursor, the AI code editor, for $60 billion. Rocket company paid $60 billion for autocomplete. But it's not ironic and it's not left field enough for me. So the third one, the best open source coding model on earth, shipped this week, free MIT licensed, runs on your laptop, and it's Chinese. Somewhere a pricing team at a US lab is explaining to their board why the competition doesn't send invoices.
That's pretty good.
It's probably the best laugh we've had. And then just the final one over here. SpaceX owns Cursor. It also rents its data center to Anthropic, to Google, and this week, 6.3 billion to Reflection AI. Every major lab now runs on Elon's computer. They're not competitors, they're tenants. All right, that was more of a fact than a funny, but there you go. So don't worry, people, we are safe. We have not yet achieved true super intelligence because, I don't think any of those can qualify for me to go on stage at the comedy club and get an entire audience rolling on the floor with laughs. Anything to take us home, Emil?
No, that's it from me, but I appreciate your commended effort for keeping up the good fight with the jokes. One day we'll get there.
Yes. And of course, next week, I think we will probably do a bit of a model shootout, just exactly where we're at. So there will be more on the San Carlos Records experiment. Can we actually get to $20 in revenue? And I think there will also be an interesting project that folks will be able to try out, which would have been released this week, but the AI wasn't able to produce the guide. And that is, I have built a version of Andrej Karpathy's self-recursive knowledge base. And that's a really interesting tool that I think is a fundamental staple for anybody. If you are in the world of work or you have a hobby, then what you want to do is keep up with the latest and the greatest news. And this self-recursive knowledge base does that. And I have a secret to share because I have actually extended it to go from an information model into an applied knowledge model. So you will be able to give me some feedback, Emil, on how well it has done that. It is really pushing the envelope, and some might say it's even the bleeding edge of knowledge management. But what else would you expect from a show called the Bleeding Edge Podcast?
Look forward to it.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a great week. Thanks for your contribution, Emil, and we'll see you on the edge.
Adios.